fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Seahawks fans, welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with Keith Myers. Unfortunately, we're here to talk about another loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers on the road in overtime, 23-20. Keith, welcome into the show.
Yeah, so another loss. Seahawks fall to 2-4. That is not a good thing. It's not where they wanted to be. And this kind of felt must win for this team, because the wins without Russell Wilson are going to be hard to come by. And this was a game that was winnable. Next week's going to be rough. The week after that should be a win again. That's against Jacksonville. But Jacksonville did pick up a win this week against Miami. So, maybe they're starting to turn their season around.
Yeah, they look good doing so too.
Yeah. So, I look at this. If the Seahawks needed that win against the 49ers to avoid having the season fall off completely when it did, and they got it. And now they are in desperate need of another win. And I don't know if it's going to come this week, but going into that bye week at 3-5, that's going to be hard for them to come out of. Hopefully Wilson will be back after the bye week. It sounds like his recovery is going well ahead of schedule, but still, they're going to be way back in the standings.
Yeah, you would have never have guessed that this would have been a must-win game in the first half. The Seahawks just didn't look like they came prepared at all to be competitive in this game in the first half, at least offensively. Defensively, actually, they kind of showed up in the first half, and they just traded punts basically, for most of the first half, but they nonetheless fell behind 14-0 at halftime. And I thought, you and I were trading text at the half that it was looking pretty dismal. It was kind of crazy, and then they kind of came out. So I guarantee there was some yelling going on in that locker room at halftime, because they came out and looked like a completely different team on offense. They looked like they had some urgency. They had some pride. Their running game, Collins was able to run effectively and with some physicality that they had been missing, I think, all year. Even with Chris Carson healthy and here, there just wasn't that really physical, imposing your will kind of mental aspect to the offense at all. No identity, no physical identity at all. And at least they showed that even in just the third quarter. It failed to kind of carry forward after the third quarter in this game. But they did enough in that third quarter to make it a game. Mm-hmm. They even pulled ahead at one point. And it wasn't the outcome, but it left you with kind of a neutral feeling. Was like, well, it could have been worse. We didn't win, but they did just enough to maybe carry over some hope that maybe they could put it together at another time. And it just kind of kicks the can down the road a little bit for this team. But nonetheless, while there was some great individual performances that I think that we could point to and we can talk about during the show, overall, though, it did kind of leave you with that, well, we really needed that, and that was there for the taking, and we didn't get it. Mm-hmm. Now what?
Yeah, the offense had 68 yards at halftime and 3 first downs. That's it. 68 total yards, 3 first downs. They looked genuinely just out of sync, bad.
Anemic.
Yeah, it was just there's not enough. There's a lot of adjectives that can work there, and all of them seem to apply, and none of them are good. But you're right. When they came out in the second half and they started running the football, they were able to go down and get two touchdowns, 2 very effective touchdown drives. Alex Collins, the guy had 20 rushes for 101 yards. That's incredible. just continued, to grind those yards out for all of that. But the Steelers adjusted. They took that second safety that they had back to guard against Metcalf, and they brought him up to the line of scrimmage. And with that extra, guy in the box, it shut down the running game. And the Seahawks had no answer because, one, they couldn't pass block a couple of guys. And so every time they tried to throw against those sets, there wasn't there just wasn't the ability to, get the ball out. And then, Geno is a backup quarterback. He's not Russell Wilson. He's not going to hit that deep shot to Metcalf when you think he's about to get sacked. And the Seahawks needed one of those in this game. And especially, after Pittsburgh changed up their defense and what they were doing, the Seahawks needed the ability to exploit the hole that was created by that change, and they simply couldn't get it done.
And Smith, everyone wants to say, well, he did okay. Yeah, he did okay. In that third quarter, they handed the ball off all but one play during that drive or two drives that they had there, where they just really capitalized on the Steelers kind of falling asleep at the wheel a little bit. And Steelers came in with a really pretty decent defending the run game, and overall defense is top 10. And they were, able to adjust in the fourth quarter and then in overtime. But Geno Smith left the game 23-32, 209 yards passing. He had that overtime fumble, obviously. The offensive line was fairly pathetic in the pass blocking game. Mm-hmm. Geno Smith took 5 sacks. Most of those were not on him. Most of those came because of the offense. They just, they got to him within a couple seconds type of a thing. In addition to those 5 sacks, the offensive line surrendered 10 tackles for loss. 10 tackles for loss. That's more than, I'm going to talk about a few players in a little bit. 4 pass deflections on the defensive line. I thought Geno was kind of side-arming the ball a little bit, and that was kind of contributing to that. And quite frankly, the Steelers were excellent at that. I just thought it was just one of those factors in the game that I think that if somehow he is able to complete those passes and extend drives, this could be looking at a completely different game. So I thought their defense really did make the difference in this game, particularly the TJ Watt strip fumble at the end of the game to close it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, TJ Watt was unblockable, or at least he was unblocked in this game. Like he,
I didn't particularly care for his rough up of was it Collins or Dallas on that run play
It was Collins, and where he's like punching him in the gut.
Yeah, it was punched him in the gut and then tried to punch him with these overhand things. I was like, oh, dude, that's just not a good look. A, and B, the punch to the gut thing. I get it. He was probably trying to come up with an upward thing for the ball, but that closed fist thing, it just, it's not, it's like the NFL needs to do something about that, I think.
You're punching at the ball is fine, but you got to hit the ball, or at least near the ball. He was just punching him in the gut, punching him in the shoulder. He didn't even come close to the ball.
They did get the foul called on that, which was totally legitimate. Yeah. But nonetheless, I just thought it was kind of a weak thing for a player that really doesn't need to do that to be effective.
Mm-hmm. And then the other notable play was the pancake block by Jamarco Jones, which quite honestly was a foul. It wasn't called because he
where he got him up into the helmet.
Yeah, he launched into him with his helmet and just pancaked him backwards, which, at that point in the game, Watt had dominated so badly.
And that came after the punching thing. And I was like, okay, payback.
Yeah. And so, and it was like, okay, it's good to see once, but it should have been a foul. But at the same time, that's like the one play where it felt like Seahawks blocked him.
Right.
And
right.
When it comes down to the final play where when Geno fumbled the ball, there was no help. There was no attempt. You had a back going out on that side, no rub, nothing to slow him down. I just felt like there were points where the Seahawks could have very easily given Shell some help and chose not to. Like there were some points where I think they made it worse on themselves. And I get they're just trying to get the ball out quick and have that be the answer, but it wasn't working. I mean, that's why they had 5 sacks. It would have been way more, but Geno actually did a pretty good job of getting the ball out quick on a lot of plays. So, yeah.
All right.
It's a thing.
All right. For our podcast listeners, we're going to read an ad right now from DraftKings, our sponsor for the show. Okay. So conversely, though, on the defense, Roethlisberger didn't have any sort of things to have to work through. He just kind of went through his progressions, not sacked once, only took 1 quarterback hit, 29 of 40, 229 yards, 1 touchdown. He was unremarkable. Like most defenses, any decent defense, I think we would have walked out of this with a win. The way that our offense came on in the second half, we couldn't get a stop after that, though, and that was it. Because their offense wasn't special.
They put together 2 drives at the end of the second quarter to get that 14-point lead, and they really didn't do much outside of that in the whole game. Just very kind of unremarkable as far as, I have been thinking this all year, watching Roethlisberger play. I think he should have retired. And having seen him play against we know to be a pretty bad Seattle defense, he probably should have retired. So,
no, he's not taking him anywhere this year. But they beat the Seahawks. Came into the game 2-3. I read something on Twitter where Pete was kind of saying, "Hey, we've made progress. This is it's a good game to build on because for whatever reason,
because they broke the string of 450 yards surrendered in every game. So
right, yeah, and it's just it is pathetic. So what I was going to say earlier about the players I was going to talk about with regards to the 10 pressures and so forth. Carlos Dunlap, Kerry Hyder, and Jamal Adams combined for 24 sacks last year. They have 0 combined sacks after 6 games. The same group had 29 tackles for loss last year. Now remember, I just said Pittsburgh had 10 in just this game. The same group has 29 tackles for loss last year. This year they have 5, 1/3 of the way through the season combined. And that's why the Seahawks are 2-4. Essentially.
Yeah. I mean,
we can't get to the quarterback. We can't put any pressure. We're not getting any hits behind the line of scrimmage. Everything's coming. That's why Bobby Wagner leaves the game with 14 tackles. And those tackles are awesome, right? He's at least keeping us in games, but all those tackles are coming behind the line of scrimmage, folks.
He's not getting up. He's not attacking downhill and making those tackles at the line of scrimmage or within a yard. He's making those tackles 3-4 yards downfield because that's where the play needs to be made. We need more disruption up front. We need guys that can get through and create havoc, make runners stop and cut back and cut it back into tackles and just create havoc. And they're not doing it. They're not doing it against the run. They're not doing it as getting pressure on the quarterback. It's just they're not getting it done. And this was supposed to be the strength of the defense. Well,
and Pete was saying today in his press conference, hey, I thought our defense played better. We didn't allow nearly as many explosive plays as we did, the week prior. And for me, I'm thinking, awesome. We just went against a previously 2-3 team. We only allowed 2 explosive plays on the worst explosive play offense in the league and a 27th ranked overall offense. And you're kind of offering up praise to your defense. Come on. Let's be real. You're not fooling anybody with that. It is what it is. We're not good. We're just not on defense. And this is one of those games where we thought that it would be great for the Seahawks to be able to get right. And if we allowed only 2 explosive plays, well, that's part of the game. And I'll take that as kind of an advance, even though this is not a great offense that we faced. But nonetheless, to get nothing, no pressures, no tackles behind the line of scrimmage on this team is just not acceptable at all.
Well, and the one guy who was disruptive of the defensive lineman, the one guy that kind of lived in the backfield a little bit and got some pressure and did some things, left the game in the fourth quarter on a stretcher.
Gerald Taylor, thankfully, flew back with the team. All his MRIs and CAT scans came back negative. Pete said that it's not even a neck injury. It's more of a shoulder thing. And it's 50-50 right now, whether he starts the next game. So that's great news, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic news, but I mean, basically it's all on one player, and Taylor's
seemingly
there's some inconsistency in his game, and he's making some mistakes here and there. But you got to remember, this is essentially his rookie year, and for defensive linemen, that big step comes after year one typically. And so, and this is essentially his rookie year because he didn't play a snap last year because of his leg injury. So, they're getting a lot of production out of him and Bobby Wagner, and who else up front?
3 of the bottom 5 Pro Football Focus players on the defensive line. Al Woods was the worst graded player on the defense at 44.5, followed by Brian Monet, followed by Alton Robinson at 49.
Which is weird because Alton Robinson was great the first few games.
Yeah.
And then he just hasn't played well. Although Al Woods was great the first, had been doing really well, and he has been falling off now.
It makes you wonder if some of these guys are getting nicked up a little bit.
It might be, or it's the inconsistency of that particular scoring mechanism.
Right. Exactly.
Flaws in the way that it's done.
Sure. It's difficult to know. It really is, because so many things, I think, on the defensive side of the ball right now have gone wrong. There are some things to highlight, though, that kind of went right in this game, particularly on a couple of different players. Trey Brown came in after Sidney Jones left with an injury. Don't know. I don't have an update on Sidney Jones's injury, but Trey Brown. Unfortunately,
that's Sidney Jones's pro career.
Yes.
Is that he plays, he flashes some, shows you that he might be a decent player, and then gets hurt. And he's done that every year. And unfortunately, hopefully this is a minor thing and he's still back, and this isn't going to continue that trend, but he's hurt. And, we just have to worry about that. But you're right. Trey Brown came in. He played pretty well. Specifically, he made that stop. I believe it was in overtime. After the Seahawks had got the ball punted and given it to the Steelers, and Roethlisberger completes that pass on third down, and it's him and the receiver, and only 2 yards to go, and he just squares him up. That pop you can hear as he hits him drove him back. That was textbook.
Yes.
Textbook
play. That was so encouraging. I was so happy. That was one of the highlights of the game for sure. It made me smile immediately because I knew that kid was going to be in the fold. And I remember last week we talked, and we were talking about how we're going to fix the defense. And we just, we kind of went round and round, and we settled in on, at least I did, letting the defensive backs kind of just let the defensive backs be, and bring Jamal Adams up closer to the line of scrimmage. And sure enough, they kind of did that a little bit in this game. And Trey Brown came in and did actually pretty good. And you said, if you're going to depend on Trey Brown, a rookie, to come in his first game and be good enough to elevate the defense, then, God help you, or whatever you said. And I was like, It is what it is. Here's where we're at. Trey Brown's might be our guy. Who knows?
But I wouldn't say he elevated the defense. But
I know, but you know what I mean.
He did make a few plays. He looked pretty sticky in coverage at times. He looked significantly better than he ever did when I saw him in training camp, because I mean, he was hurt for part of it, but when he wasn't hurt and out there, he kind of looked a little lost. So for him to get out there and really look good in his first action,
at least not look bad.
When I thought he looked good, let's
give him some credit.
I wouldn't say not bad. I'd say I thought he looked good.
That's great. That's awesome coming from you. That is amazing.
So it's encouraging. It is. The other thing that was encouraging is you saw Jamal Adams spend most of the game up around the line of scrimmage.
Yes,
that's encouraging.
And when he wasn't, we saw a ball bounce off his face,
and what should have been a pick. But yeah, and then the other part that was encouraging is, so when we were talking about fixing the defense, I said you want to keep two safeties back, then bring in Blair, and play a big nickel with two safeties back and Adams up, and I saw a lot of that in this game. And that was encouraging just from a schematic standpoint.
It does seem like a roadmap forward.
Yeah, it's about putting guys in position to be successful, and getting Adams up around the line of scrimmage where he can be disruptive and be himself is how you make him successful. And if he's successful, the defense will be more successful. The other
thing that the defense was able to do in this game, starting with this game, was to move DJ Reed over to the right cornerback position, where he seemed to be more of a natural fit. Now, he did go up against Deontay Johnson a few times, Pittsburgh's most productive player in this game, totaling 9 catches and 71 yards, but he didn't give up anything big. They kept him fairly contained. Really, I thought, did a fairly decent job. And I think that they've kind of found now a mix that might be working. Maybe. I think they need to stick with this sort of thing now for a while and see if it's kind of works long term. We'll find out. I don't think it's going to be good enough to go up against some of the really, really good teams, like the Arizona game coming up, in a few weeks is going to be a big test for this team. I don't know that they're capable of hanging with that sort of a thing, but maybe New Orleans next week with Jameis Winston coming in. That might be to find out kind of where they're at, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there is some reason to be encouraged, but I think part of the reason, you got to be careful. This was one of the worst offenses in the NFL that they went up against. So where is there improvement? Yes, but they still, they were still gave up some stuff, and but it gave them an opportunity to work some young guys in. Trey Brown got a chance to play. If Darrell Taylor is back and not going to miss a lot of time, that's really encouraging. If they can get, guys like Blair and Ryan Neal on the field more, that would be outstanding.
Right. I thought Ryan Neal played okay too.
Yeah. I mean, Ryan Neal has performed whenever he's been out there. He just isn't out there very often. The coaches are, rolling with different guys on the field. I think Ryan Neal needs to get more playing time, more snaps. I think he's doing pretty well.
So a couple of things to pay attention to on offense, injury-wise, is that Collins looked awesome, but he left early with a hip. That's why he wasn't in there in the fourth quarter and overtime. And it'll be interesting to monitor that. Coincidentally, Rashad Penny's back 100% at practice, and he's ready to go full speed, according to Pete Carroll. So we have Rashad Penny at least for a game, or however many plays he lasts until he goes down. So that's encouraging. At least we have somebody. I thought Dallas and Homer did an effective job in the roles that they played, though, in this offense. I thought Dallas, in particularly, looked really good returning the ball on kickoff returns and punt returns. He's very effective that way. He just has no fear. And I think that's like 90% of being a returner. is that factor and just kind of shooting yourself straight up the gaps and stuff and just, whatever comes.
Yeah,
comes.
Dallas had 3 returns for 97 yards. So
isn't that awesome?
A 32.3 yard average.
It was just really interesting seeing him like continuously over the 35-yard line on those returns. I just thought the consistency there is just remarkable, and something we haven't seen for a few years. Well, since Lockett was returning, really.
Yeah.
The other one that I'm just not sure about is Damien Lewis. According to Pete Carroll, he's got a sprained AC joint in his shoulder. And if you're an offensive lineman, you've got a joint sprain in your shoulder. That's big news. And that could potentially keep him out for a while. Yeah. And I don't know what the status is or severity or the grade of that sprain. And we'll just have to wait and see. Pete called him a warrior, and if he can play, he's going to play. But that doesn't really mean anything on Monday following a game. So we'll see.
We have to watch that.
Is there anything else? Any other players you want to highlight before we get out of this show?
Well, I do think that mentioning Gerald Everett needs to be done. He came in, blocked well. Had 2 receptions on 3 targets, but he had that 41-yard reception where he fought through 2 tackles and got almost in the end zone and really looked like he was going to go down a couple of times, but just the effort and the energy, it was nice to see. Yeah,
he just got tripped up there at the 5 and almost stumbled in and just didn't quite get there. But that was a remarkable catch and run. I really did like that. It was nice to see him get involved. I know he's been working really hard. It's been frustrating for him the last couple of weeks because of the COVID thing and all that kind of crap. But he was back out there for sure, and that was good to see. What did you think about DK Metcalf? Kind of showed up in this game, I think, more than even Tyler Lockett. Tyler, I think, had 1 or 2 catches. Well, I think two or three, but
he had 2 receptions for 35 yards. He was targeted 7 times, but they had a hard time getting him the ball. There were a couple of throws that were in the dirt where if get him anywhere close to on target and he gets a reception on a 3rd down and extends it. But there's that. But Metcalf showed up, 7 targets, 6 receptions, 58 yards. It's not a huge production when you got your backup quarterback who's not pushing the ball downfield and you're the big play threat that goes down the field. It's hard to put up the stats you're used to.
Yeah, he did have that fumble in overtime that almost cost them. Freddie Swain came in there and got that, ran the ball over to where they snap it so they could get that thing down quickly.
That was such a heads up, smart play.
And I don't even know what Metcalf was thinking there. They didn't really need that extra 3 or 4 yards that he was attempting to get.
No, they needed him to get out of bounds and save the clock.
I'm not sure what was going on there, but I noticed that Shannon Sharp, was scolding him a little bit on Twitter, and Metcalf was very quick to fire back at Mr. Sharp.
Really?
Yeah, oh gosh, it was not good. It was not a good look for DK Metcalf, and he needs to. I think it'd be wise for him to kind of not engage in stuff like that because it's
especially not with a Hall of Famer.
Not with a Hall of Famer, and I just think that it was not a great look for him. Okay, so I think that's enough. Let's put this thing to bed. We've got another show coming up this week where we're going to kind of get into it a little bit about where we're at with this 2-4 team, and it is what it is. So we'll just go for it. But for now, follow Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. I'm at MW Seahawk. The show is at Hawks Playbook. SeahawksPlaybook.com is our website. And you can find us on your favorite podcast app platforms and YouTube. And make sure you subscribe. So until next time, go Hawks. Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.